Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Astro Alchemy. It's Sarah and Laura. We haven't been here in a little bit of time because we basically took a holiday sabbatical. It was like, for me, it was like a mental health sabbatical at the very end of the human design year, basically, because now that we're in the 41st gene key and gate, we're going to basically be entering a new year as far as human design is concerned. So what better way to kick back off our podcast than with this particular gene key, this gate. So just wanted to let everyone know where we've been, that we're back, that we're going to be separating the episode up a little bit more. So we're really going to focus this episode on the key and the human design portion. And then we will still have videos with the astrology. And of course, we're going to pepper in the astrology because we are who we are. So today's Wednesday, January 25th. Here it's 4:17 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, tell your friends if you're interested in learning about the gates and the gene keys as we move through the different transits of the sun. Laura, is there anything that I'm missing?
No, I realized, sorry, technical difficulties here in the beginning. I don't know if my settings are set up so we're face to face. I think we're just like one at a time in your face right now, but Mercury retrograde happened during our sabbatical. So we're still in the like little trickles of that. So sorry if this isn't how it used to be. We'll fix it next episode. Just bringing that up in case I don't know what it looks like for you guys on the receiving end for now, but just thought I'd share. But other than that, no. So human design, is that what we're doing right now?
Yes, we're going to jump into the human design and the current chart of the moment.
Okay, here we go. Here's the current chart of the moment.
Oh, the 3041.
Yeah. It'll be over with the end of 41 because Saturn moved into 30. Saturn, luckily, thankfully, is out of 49 for me at least. Saturn was in 49 on and off since March of last year. And finally last week, I think on the 19th or the 20th, I think it was around midnight, whatever day switch that was, but Saturn moved out of 49 into 30. And so that's just a bit of sweet relief for everyone who has gate 19 hanging like me in an undefined root with an undefined ESP. It was a very long transit of emotional energy and pressurized energy that we aren't necessarily accustomed to if you're undefined root and undefined ESP. Anyways, the sun is in gate 41, which is in the root center, this ground center on the bottom. If you're on Spotify, hi Spotify, feel free to pull up a human design chart so you can follow along with visual aid if you so please. I'm on geneticmatrix.com, and if you scroll to the bottom, you see the chart of the moment, which will be a different chart than the moment that you're listening to this, so just bear that in mind. But gate 41 is in the root center, part of the collective abstract circuitry reaching towards the emotional solar plexus with the channel of realization. Gate 41, the gate of fantasy, or some of that decrease, the gate of decrease, and 30, the gate of desire, together as part of the channel of recognition that leads to the emotional wave of desires coming to fruition. We can read the little thing for you. Currently, it's the 4th line day of opportunities and externalization. The limitation of resources, which maximizes development of potential. The gate of contraction. And like Sarah said before I read this little bit, this is the beginning of the Rave New Year. And that is because 41 is the start codon. Every gene key and gate is associated with a genetic codon marker, 3 little letters that constitute our genetic code, our genome. And every codon sequence, every genetic sequence begins with the codon associated with gate 41, which I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it's whatever. Maybe it shows here, maybe not. I don't think it shows what codon it is. Amino acid, methionine, there we go. That's the initiating codon for all genetic sequences. And because of that, it kicks off every beginning, everything that exists because of this gene key, which is funny because it's decrease, not beginnings, but decrease is necessary. Limitation, that's necessary for maximizing of potential. Currently, we have it in detriment because the moon, where is the moon? The moon's in 25. I don't know why it's showing up as detriment, but the expenditure of energy on maintaining relationships rather than on correction in times of decrease, weak associations are shunned as costly, no matter how attractive. The energy which fuels holding on to feelings rather than adapt. But I don't know why that's showing up as being debilitated right now in detriment. Do you know why it's doing that?
I actually didn't read the line companion. We can take a look at that if we want to. But what I will say is that it's possible that there's no exaltation.
Oh, true. That might be it. That's probably the case with some lines for all the lines of all the gates. Some are neutral, in which that they don't have detriments, or they don't have exaltations, or they're just weird for some reason, and this is perhaps one of those. But successful adaptation to limitation. It is the gate of fantasy, and in that it deals with the abstract way, the abstract where it's the abstract circuitry deals with human experience. It's the pressure to have any human experience, but the point of that is that it's collective, and things that are collective are for sharing with others. And here we have the pressure for desire to come to something. 30 is the gate of desire. And with 41, there's the pressurized energy trying to push desire towards doing something. Ruhu, the founder of human design, who created the system, talks about 41 in the sense that either you have a hot head or you have a cool head. If you have a hot head, then you're playing into the emotions that are being adrenalized in gate 30, and you're living up all the fantasies, and perhaps you're using that pressure to initiate experiences which are incorrect for you, versus once you wait that wave and get to emotional clarity, then you have a cool head, and that cool head will be the correct fuel to give rise to the correct experiences that you are indeed supposed to experience. Just because we have fantasies doesn't mean that we're supposed to act on them. And so our inner authority will help identify which experiences are correct to actually have. But the point of experience is to go through the whole motion of it, and then to have some sort of awareness sharing moment at the end of the experience to say, oh, I see what that was about. I see what I learned. And so it has to go through that whole process, compared to logical circuitry is about, finding patterns and testing them and seeing what's true and what isn't true, what holds. 41 and the whole abstract way is about going in and seeing what's there and just playing around in all the feelings and potentials of emotions. Sarah is very personal when it comes, or Sarah has a lot of personal experience when it comes to this channel, because this is one of her 2 channels in her chart. So feel free to elaborate on how.
Oh my gosh. Well, I was thinking if you want to, you can minimize this, but you know who had this channel too? Marilyn Monroe. And I was just thinking about the way that, so she had this, and then the channel of structuring. So she had everything else open. She was an emotional projector. And because I was thinking about what is the experience that other people have of this channel when it comes into contact with them? Because we know with the 41 specifically, it's about desires, and something that it's interesting that in the I Ching it's decreased. It feels, there's a method to the madness, and Richard Rudd, I think, gets into it a little bit in his chapter on the 41. But Ra says something like, with the 41, you're always, you have you're always, he said a lot of things about it, actually. None of them were that pleasant, especially if you have it in an open center. So forget the 30-41, just think about the 41 by itself. But it's you have fantasy, and then and it's also a love gate. So you have a fantasy, and you get a partner that is in your head fulfilling your fantasy, and then it's they stop fulfilling it, and it's you have to get another partner. And so he was saying he was always falling in love with women that he would sleep with, because it was the fantasy would come around. And then it was well, once the fantasy was played out, and the mundane aspect of materiality started to set in, he was okay, what just happened? I'm on to the next. So you know, I was just thinking about this because too with Marilyn Monroe, I mean, she had an open throat, but like one of her, like she like was able to with the 3041 like be a fantasy, like she really was, and she was able to turn herself on and off, and so she knew, and this was maybe more like open throat, but she knew when to emote and to put on the emotional energy, and she knew, and then you know when she wasn't emoting she like turned it off and like people weren't as aware of her, so like she could turn it on and off depending on how she was walking down the street. And obviously to a lesser extent, like I've had the same experience, because it's like when I'm in a mood or whatever, it's like I'm hidden in a cloak, and then it's like when I'm happy, it's like it's people are just like they can feel the emotional energy, I feel like that I have. So in that way, you know, the channel is interesting, not just as like the experience of it, but also the way that other people like my personal experience of it, but how other people perceive it when they come into contact with it, when they have those undefined centers, or they have one half of the channel or whatever. As far as how I've dealt with it in my life, my mom also has a 3041, so I grew up around it, and I have an extremely active imagination. Neptunian can be very dangerous, and when I get like a hankering to do something, I'm hot right now, you know, and I've gotten to the point, and I think this is part of my Saturn return, because I have the 41.2 in with Saturn is there. That's the planet that is Saturn. And I feel like with my Saturn return, it's like finally I'm moving to the cool headedness of being like, I'm not going to do this anymore. Like it's too dangerous. It's fun. It's fun when it's fun. It's fun when the emotional high is high, and then when the emotional high is not high anymore, it is not fun. It's like it's the opposite of fun. And the other thing that Ross said, and this is just about the defined emotional center in general, so this is like again less to do with the 41 but more to do with the current transit, since we have the 3041, is like he said something along the lines of when the emotional center is like good and on a high, it's like sexy, and when it's not and it's like on a low, it's like the opposite of sexy. I just started laughing because you really have to be a certain type of person to be able to handle an emotional person, because it's not as consistent. It's not like maybe like sacral energy where you wake up every day with the same thing, the same kind of consistent person. You know, with this particular channel and this type of person, it's like you're dealing with two different types of people depending on where they are, and then everything in between. So yeah, and the interesting thing, and I guess this is comforting to me in some way, is just that the 3041, because it's collective, it's like, okay, like I'm like fine, like I'll like sacrificing myself on the cross for my experiences so that I can share them with other people so that they could potentially be wiser or more discerning next time they do something.
Well, to respond to that, the part of it being collective is like there for the collective to understand what's it like to have that sort of experience. And just because you have it doesn't mean you're supposed to go through uncomfortable experiences, because that's what your inner authority, like if you have a whole channel, you're going to have emotional authority, which is to say you have to wait for clarity. That if you're feeling uberly excited or depressed about something, like don't do anything, even though there's the pressure to do something about it. You have to wait. But the point of it is that not every experience is correct. And that's why we have fiction and like novels and TV shows, so we can experience all that without having to go through it firsthand. We can live vicariously through fantasy in other forms. And so part of this energy is realizing what fantasies are worth living out and actually going through, and having that recognition, the recognition of what's actually correct to experience. Yes. But the point of it is, at the same time, because it's collective, it's not personal. It's not like, what am I going to experience for me, for my own development and growth? It's what does the collective need to experience And am I going to be the vessel of that experience? It's not about you. Part of the energies of it being root to emotional solar plexus, like Sarah said, it's sexy because it's one of the sexual gates. Like all the channels between the root and the ESP relate to our sexuality and wanting that and all that stuff. So yeah, it's very driven by human desire in that sense, unless but yeah, it's very interesting. And like Sarah was saying earlier with Ra has 41 in an undefined root. So that's why he identifies with it compared to like me. Like, do I have desires or the pressure to have human experience? No way. Like, I don't. So on the other end, here I am without this channel with the undefined root, no internal way of processing fantasy. Well, like through this channel, I have fantasies, but not through this channel, not for the sake of like, I really want to experience this. No thanks, that's not for me. And so it's interesting when it does come up in this channel, because like now I'm getting ideas and I'm wondering, do I act on them or not? Because the ideas at the same time feel like they're coming from my mind. But you can play with what would happen if I do XYZ or I don't. And yeah, just playing them. The head is interesting because both the head and the root are pressure centers. And so they have a similarity between them, the head, the pressure to think and ask questions and figure things out and look for answers, and the root pressure to do. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely have gotten to the point with this channel that I'm like, okay, I get it. And I've also seen what it looks like for a grown ass adult woman, not me, my mother, to like never get it. You know, like to never go from hot to cold with the channel. And yeah, it's just, it's my personality design. I mean, it's my personality design. So it, you know, and this has been something that I've been thinking about because my personality is both, it's right. So it's all, my personality is receptive, and I'm, what's the other thing?
Can I explain for the listeners? Sarah's personality variable is the top, or not top, the right hand arrows within her chart both point to the right. There we go. So if you're looking at your own chart, you want to look at your personality variables, the arrows are the variables. And so that's what that is. Okay, continue. Sorry.
Well, yeah, and I mean, basically both of those are like very receptive. It's just a receptive quality of my personality, in which when I have a desire that gets activated, right, within the start codon with the 41, it's like my not self wants to take the steering wheel and start being like, we're going to get this, we're going to do it. And so it's been like, you know, it's basically like having a kid that's like so addicted to sugar, like know where the sugar is, and like, but it's out of reach, and like you come home and he's like literally stacked like 50 different types of things on top of each other to like climb up and get the sugar. Like that's what it feels like internally when you're emotionally on a high and you're not supposed to actually act on it. And for people who have an undefined center, so they don't have the 30, they don't have any other connection from the roots open, like there's probably less of an ability to ever find discernment. So I feel like with me, like I'm finally, it's interesting to have Saturn in the start codon. I mean, that's something that I've been thinking about. It's interesting to have a planet Saturn in the start codon. I've been really meditating on what that means. But for people who don't have gone through the emotional process to see why it is important to not allow your desires to be fueled by your not self into doing and acting and behaving in certain ways, like until they figure it out, they're going to probably be living out the same fantasy feedback loop until maybe they hit themselves against the wall enough times. Because I think when you have this in your profile, the 41 specifically in an open root, like it's a vibe. Like it's a vibe. It's a whole vibe. Because I know a few people with it, and again, that might be because it's a start codon. That might be because people, generally speaking, who have open roots with defined gates in them, may have a, one of their, not issues, but of just kind of like rushing around. So there's always that kind of like really busy like energy if they're in their not self. But yeah, it's definitely been the 41 specifically, because that's where the sun is right now, has just been something that over the past, my Saturn return, and now, and I'm not going to talk about that right now, but my Saturn return, like, which is what just passed, like, this is what it's been all about. It's about me figuring this shit out. Excuse my French. So yeah, do you want to add anything before we talk about the gene key a little bit more?
I don't think so. Oh, actually, just to respond about your joke about the kid in the kitchen, my sister showed me a video. I don't know if it was on like Instagram or something, but it was like a grandma with like a 3-year-old teaching him how to bake cookies. He put everything in his mouth. He put raw egg, like she cracked an egg, he put it in his mouth.
I
like
know, I've seen
that
it.
compulsive energy. It was really entertaining. I wish I could find it again. I don't know where it is on the internet, but that probably has 4130 or some sort of compulsive disorder.
Yes, no, well, that's definitely the 4130 who hasn't mastered the cool, like who hasn't figured out how to have a cool head. So, but yeah, I did see it. It was good, because then like one of the memes was like my higher self, or what was it? It's like it was like my guardian angels, or like my higher self trying to stop me from basically like, from all of the things, like from going through like more trauma patterns. But it was just, yeah, I mean, there's this compulsion to repeat things. And like a lot of times when you feel for whatever reason that there's something energetically incomplete, it's like such a thorn in your side until you get it there, and until you realize that like the thorn's always going to be in your side, even if you do push the energy forward. You're going to keep thinking that there's something out there that you need to go and find, especially with the channel.
I wanted to respond to something you said. You said repeat, and it made me think of, how this relates to decrease. The logical side wants to repeat because it wants to find things that it can implement continuously, regularly in the future. But the abstract circuitry just wants it one and done. It doesn't need to have the experience over and over again. It just wants to know what it's like. So it can be like, okay, I'm done with that. I figured out what it was about, and I can put it under my belt, and like I'm good to go. And so part of that is like that pressure to just do it, because you don't know if you're going to get the opportunity again or what it's going to be like. And it's just like the one-time experience that hence the fantasy, hence Ra's experience with sexual partners. And then he's like, okay, been there. What's next?
Well, but I mean, the repetition compulsion is that you think that something's out there that you can't figure out internally. So it's like you're going after something externally. Even if the thing that you think that you're going after is slightly different, right? It's not the exact same. You're not like repeating a ritual around it. The fantasy has shifted, the fantasy has changed, but like the idea that you can fulfill the fantasy is the repetition. And that's where you have to like really have like a sit down with yourself and do some dumpster diving and be like, this is not, we're not going to figure this out externally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do hear you, and it's
That's just a great clarification. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I get it, because it's different. The ritual aspect of it is not there. The like that kind of like scientific, I can repeat this process over and over again and I'll have the same outcome isn't there for sure. So yeah, that makes sense.
But then if we just like analyze this and think about it, it makes it tricky for relationships again, which is why this is one of the love gates. And if you have a partner who has gate 41, then you have to be open to their fantasies and when they change, because if you can't fulfill their fantasy, then they're going to be like, okay, bye. I want to fulfill this, or the desires, not just the fantasies, but the other side of the equation. And so, yeah, because it's such a one and done thing, you have to find the dedication to the partner to remain there, because the person with the 41 just wants the constant beginnings. So
yes. Oh my God, that's such a whole word too, because with Ra's literally the founder of human design. And like he was able to have this realization because he understands the energy. But like for everyone else that doesn't know human design, that has this gate defined, that doesn't have a defined root center, I mean, good luck. Like like just good luck. Like I hope that you come across this video so you can understand what's going on and you don't have to ruin all your relationships.
Yeah. Don't ruin your relationship, or do what's best for you.
Exactly.
But yeah.
Anyway,
We can move on
not
to
to
the
give any life advice, but yeah, we can move on to the gene keys.
Gene key 41, the shadow of fantasy, the gift of anticipation, and the city of emanation, with the two shadow sides being dreamy for oppressive and hyperactive for reactive. The programming partner is 31, which is interestingly, so this is the start codon. It sets off all the processes, and yet 31 is the end of the, no, it's not. Yes, it is. It's the end of the logical circuit, because the logical circuit ends in channel 731 in the throat, and 31 is that point. So that's really interesting, like all beginnings and logical conclusions. Fascinating. But yeah, it's decreased, mountain over lake, codon ring of origin, methionine. And yeah, Sarah, do you want the prime emanation? Do you want to chat about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna move away a little bit from like doing any, I haven't like, I read the chapter, but I really didn't write anything down because I'm just like, I want to just kind of riff. But this is a really big one for our culture and our generation specifically, because the problem becomes when you're living in fantasy and like you have like desires to draw down energy into materiality, but you are so like hopped up on the hopium, the hopium,
Yeah.
dopamine, opium, hope, whatever, just like a big salad of it, that you end up just staying in your head with the fantasy and not actually being able to do anything about it. And the thing about the 41 that Richard Rudd said is that it's hooked into the morphogenetic field. And so it's like we can go in there, people who have it, and we can just hang out in there because, it's just like kind of this open channel of experiential collective consciousness ideas. And we could just hang out. But like someone, and this is who Richard Rudd mentions, like Mozart or Beethoven, like they're able to pull down the energy from the collective unconscious and create something from it. And so it's like when you're stuck in fantasy, which I mean, how many of us are, we have whatever, our phones, we have our memes, we have all of the ideas that we could possibly want to access to just keep us distracted and keep us under a fog of our own fantasy, so we're not actually living in the real world. It's very Neptunian, extremely Neptunian. And I'm speaking from someone who has Neptune transiting their sun right now. It feels like a fog, like your life is constructed out of this ideal image that you have. You're so busy living in the past and the future that you don't actually have time for the present moment, and you don't actually have time for the present circumstances. And because the present circumstances aren't living up to your ideal, you just disconnect and you go up into the field, and like you could basically just live there, not ever doing anything for your whole life. And it's interesting because there's a hyperactive and the dreamy is definitely more than Neptunian, because that's like the people who clearly aren't here. Like you're talking to them, they have their ideas of how things should be. And then the hyperactive is like people who just, again, aren't here, but they're moving really quickly because they're constantly hyper fixated on the way that they want things to be, that they can't even be present to what is. So in either case, it's like this deep incapacity for being present. And I think it's interesting too, because, well, the 3041 in general, it doesn't have any access to well, it's not gonna say it doesn't have any access to, but it's not in sacral, you know, and I think it needs like a deeply like, I don't want to say sacral practice, but something that gets it into time space, like into the present moment. However that looks. I mean, it doesn't mean that you have to have definition or whatever, but in order to be able to download things into the present and appreciate the present and enjoy the present. So that's what I would say about the shadow. Did you read
Yeah,
the
I did. And like, I think I relate to this much more in the gene key side than the human design side, because it's not like I want to have experiences, but I definitely live in a fantastical world. I feel like the tarot card associated with this gene key is the Seven of Cups, because it's so
Mm,
disillusioned in like what's actually real and what's not. And like, I've definitely lived a significant amount of my life not in reality and not actually knowing what is true and what isn't true. Sorry, there's some noises in that part of my house now. I don't know if I'm picking up on the microphone, but
I didn't hear him.
you cannot.
I didn't hear.
Okay, but it's just you talk. It's very distracting.
Okay. Okay. No, well, I was just gonna say, like, the so crazy that you said the Seven of Cups. I knew I said we're gonna split this up, and we are, but the Seven of Hearts is which is the same thing as the Seven of Cups, and like from tarot to playing cards, is the card of the year. And so the seven of cups and the Seven of Hearts, like, it is such a disappointment. Like, it is such a disappointment if you're not able to get really real about yourself. Like, that's the energy. You're fucking disappointed if you're not able to get real. And that means like being able to accept the imperfections of materiality, and then be able to draw down the fantasy with like within the understanding that like the humanity of all of us means that we're not going to be able to manifest it as perfectly as it is in the morphogenetic field. So yeah, I mean, I definitely, God, this 41, it has given me, and like, let me just say, like, full disclosure, two of the people that I've dated have the 41, and I have the 3041. And so it has been, it has plagued me within the love gates, because I've seen this energy of people just bloop, escaping reality, going up into their heads, not understanding what it takes to actually have like a real authentic human connection, because they're too busy thinking about how it would be if it was perfect. Are you still?
I am muted. I think
Okay.
we're okay now. But yeah, I feel like for a very long amount of my life, I've very much resonated with the Seven of Cups, of just like, that's my significator, that's who I am, just completely disillusioned to reality, in the sense that, yeah, like looking at the perfect possibility of how something could be, instead of actually looking at limitation and decrease and contraction, like honing down into present reality and looking at what actually is. But also just completely getting lost in the fantastical world of fiction, and like not doing anything with my life because fiction is so much more entertaining. There is that. And also I think part of that for me is my card is the Four of Diamonds, and that's Venus Neptune. So like being ruled by Neptune, I feel like it's heavy, and having Neptune in my 10th house, it's just an identifying factor for me, big Neptunian. But yeah, it's interesting because, yeah, like Richard Rudd said, it's really easy to get caught up in that field and not actually pay attention to reality, which brings us into the gift, which is anticipation, which is actually looking at what's happening, anticipating, but with like the correct lens, not the rose-colored glasses anymore.
Yeah.
Anticipation.
Yeah, well, and it's funny too, because the Seven of Cups is Mars and Pisces. That's the planetary energy, which, again, I said I was going to pepper it in, but with anticipation, it goes along with leadership with the 31, with the 31st gift, because the people who are able to anticipate things are typically the ones that are also, able to lead, or they're the ones that are given leadership opportunities, because it's like you're able to know what's going to come in the present moment. But again, it's like if you're too busy, building a house out of straw in your mind, then you're not going to be able to anticipate and like really, really be able to use that gift. So yeah, and I've definitely fallen victim to, even with my whole channel, to exiting materiality like for an indefinite amount of time until I, like, for whatever reason, decide to come back into it. And physical practices, getting into the physical body, and this is a root gate, has been really helpful for me. Like really getting in touch with my physicality, I think, is something that's important for people. Like the tactile senses, like really feeling like textures and swimming in water and feeling the air on you, just all of those things like help you from, because it basically what we're talking about is disassociating like from your body. All of those things can be really helpful. So yeah, I can't remember what the city is.
Emanation.
But
I feel like there's something with anticipation, but I don't remember what it was that I wanted to share. I had a thought, but if it comes, it'll come. I won't get hung up on.
I want to just really quick grab my book. Hold on.
Okay. I think it was with anticipation. Oh, it's the cool-headedness. Like once you wait out the heat of a desire and the passion and you like sit with it and feel it, like Sarah said, in your body, then once you actually come to the conclusion that yes, this is something that you want, then you can anticipate the process and embrace the pressure to like take the first step and do whatever needs to get done to come to whatever resolution you want to come to. But it starts with the cool-headedness of waiting and not jumping to any rash decisions, which is it's a thing for emotional people. It's funny because like the splenics tend to wait and the ESPs tend to want to be spontaneous. we take each other's strategy and we think, oh yeah, I'll do that. So it's funny.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
I'm ending it now. One of the things that he talks about too, I just wanted to say, was that the premonition, right? So that's what the anticipation is that like you're getting a premonition about what's going to happen. And so there's this kind of like psychic quality to it when it's not coming from not self energy. There can be like a real tapped in feeling from this key. And then emanation, and he talks about the Ouroboros, which this one's basically like a black hole. Like this one's just like the way that he talks about it, for me it was like almost hard to understand what even was going on, because the Ouroboros is the snake that's eating its own tail. But like I think it's because the nature of desire is that it's like a black hole. Like the more you put into it, like it's not like it ever gets full. Oh, and that's something important I wanted to say, is that people who have the 41, they yearn to be full, and then when they're full, they yearn to be empty. And so there's this never satisfied, very north node, south node kind of energy coming from it. And the Ouroboros is eating its own tail, and it's like, once you realize that the desire is never going to be satisfied, like in any real way, that's when you're able to almost just like become it. Like it's like you just are it. You're no longer going after it, if that makes sense. But it was definitely for me, like the city was kind of hard for me to fully understand. Did you? Okay.
I feel like the black hole nature falls more into the shadow than it does the city, so I skimmed over the city.
Yeah, well, but it's the Ouroboros, and like
I feel like it's more like surrendering. It's not becoming the desire, but surrendering to the experience of what it is that you're here to actually move through and go through and feel.
There you go.
That's kind of how I feel. Like the emanation of everything. If you think about, I don't know if this is a logical thought. It seems logical. Don't know if it's true. That's what I want to say. But because 41 is the start codon, you would think it's the most abundant codon in all of our bodies. But that, I think, depends on how long every gene is, because, you know, you only have one codon in the beginning, and then you can have 30 other codons in there. So it's not necessarily the most abundant, but it's in every one of them. Like every single itty bitty bit of everything starts with, or at least that has a genome, starts with 41. It's everywhere. You can't evade it. So you just have to surrender to it, surrender to the pressure of fantasy, and accept that that's what creates the facade of our reality.
Yeah. I feel like that's a really good place to stop, because I don't have anything more to add.
Okay. It's always a great place when the mind's like, okay, now what?
No, the mind's like, yeah, like that's it. Like that's it all. There you go. There you go, guys. That's the city. It really is though. So I couldn't have said it better myself. So yeah, the 41. I think that this time, not this time, but I think that after 31 years of being in this incarnation, I finally started to understand the nature of this particular one. So,
but imagine like all the people who don't know, you know. This is why you need to look at your human design and get a reading, because without it, you are lost, or just like lost to your devices, and you just live your life in complete frustration or bitterness or whatever, because you don't know what's good for you.
100%, 100%. I couldn't and you know, I realize like some people, like they have greater or lesser extents of suffering that they go through. Like some people it's a dull ache, and for some of us it's like there's so much suffering that like we need to find the systems in order to help dig us out of the hole. And so, you know, some people are just going to go through their life, going through relationships with the 41, or with the 41, and continuing the same pattern of the fantasy. And you know, this is probably why the porn industry is so big too. And like, you know, maybe they just settle in a relationship, they decide they're going to watch porn. they do there's something that they do. But I think, you know, when you hit your head against the wall enough when it comes to this specific key gate, you're gonna want to look for some answers as to, you know, as to why. Because we do have, and this is exactly what Lora was saying, you should get a reading, you should take a look at your human design and your astrology chart, because you need to know what archetypal patterns you're in the middle of, or else they will consistently come up. You're going to hit the same pattern over and over again. So you'll figure it out eventually, but it's a little bit less painful when you have a map. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm like, everybody needs to get a reading, everyone needs to take a look at their chart. And you can really reach out to both of us. We're going to have the information for Laura's website, my email linked below the video, and our contact info, and on social media, I think. So if you're interested, let us know.
To make this awkward, are we going to stop here and like change things up and do astrology in a different video? So everyone's surprised, thought you were getting some astrology, but you're not. You're going to have to watch the next video to get your daily dose of, well, not your daily dose, your weekly dose, but now it's monthly dose of astrology. So catch you on the flip side. Thank you for listening.
Peace.